It was a carefree, gleeful moment in time, and everybody in the neighborhood got plenty of sunshine. 3 boys from the suburbs were the best of friends who never drifted apart and always kept in touch with trends. One was named Rudy and he was raised in Jewish faith. A kid others said was weird and needed to lose some weight. It didn't phase studies up because they could live in 2 out loud. Growing up in a $500,000 house. Johnny and Zeke were rich kids everybody knew on A Street. And in school they were too popular to overlook, catching by surprise as if it were hooked. Living in the spectacular now. Who would thought years further down the road anything could bring them down? Colorful blouses and skirts were Zeke's weakness. One day a sibling sat down with him and said, Pete, this, you don't ever want to lose what you got, chasing after something you can't have. Cause one day you'll end up in a tight spot where nobody can do anything for you that you wish you had. After high school, things started to change. Rudy and them started getting into old nut game. He and Johnny got into promoting and producing shows for independent rock bands and took to the road, thinking of a new mission to generate money and clout. A few miles ahead, he finally figured it out. Produced death moves and get all the game. Turned relative unknowns into household names. Over the years, he got many projects flying and made big money, but he couldn't get no honeys, cause unlike John, he was a bit overweight and not someone women would want to date. Of course, he eventually got married in his mid-30s. It could be said he finally found the right one and it worked, see. But the one thing he had in common with Zeke was a spontaneous recurrence about which he'd never speak. Zeke got job placement while still in school with the help of his next of kin, training athletes to do their thing, and in turn he'd study osteopathic medicine. From there he'd advance on to the next level. But the thing unforeseen is he was a horny little devil. The one thing he and Rudy got in common, every time he treated a gymnast he was fond of, he'd get him naked and then pleasure himself, and many of them girls as young as 12. Sometimes he'd even penetrate when the parents weren't there. This went on for years, case after case, and what really wasn't fair was that the USOC allowed it and ignored every accusation that came out of youngins' mouths, which compounded the hurt and agony. Meanwhile, Rudy wondering why this bitch mad at me. Turns out she wasn't the only actress who turned down his sexual advances. Fast forward to fall 2017, seemed like they all coming out. Rudy and Zeke finna lose all their clout, their livelihoods, their marriages, even their homes.
So whatever happened to John?
Man, he long gone. He died of AIDS back in early 2000, so they ain't had no one to turn to, no way around it. Zeke got convicted on a dozen counts and was sentenced to 40+ years without a doubt. Now he's Arizona State Penitentiary bound, hoping the long bus ride to drown out the sound of all them girls pleading for him to stop what he was doing. Now the damage is done and he can forget about Rudy. He can't come to visit because he's on trial for sexual misconduct. The scandalous limelight ain't much help either. Every time Rudy sees a reporter, he needs a breather. Meanwhile, during Zeke's lockdown, he's thinking about the talk his sibling had with him that weekend. On that bench, he never really understood what it meant. Now he can only wish he had a more abundant grasp of how well he had it made before the day faded away. The things he could have made of himself and still can if he switched his mindset to a different program. So now he cherishes isolation so he can atone for his violations, regenerate his spiritual and mental health so he can become one with the universe and himself. It all starts with training the mind to deflect destructive and selfish thoughts that bind the soul that's supposed to guide you to your purpose. The true meaning of life is knowing you're worth it. The redemption